Today we are joined by Jeremy Scharlow, a true hero and advocate for PTSD awareness. From the front lines of law enforcement to the depths of personal struggle, Jeremy's story is one of resilience and hope. So get ready to join us for a thought-provoking conversation as we dive into his book and journey. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away, we will be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story. Discover how authors breathe life into characters and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us only on Books with Bridgetti.
If you've just joined us, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. Our live stream is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. Now, I am in Cape Town in South Africa, and if you're in South Africa or you keep up with the news, you will know that intermittent load shedding in South Africa is here to stay until the utilities long-term problems are resolved. And so to the side of me here, you will see that I've got a 600-watt Blue Yeti portable power station. It can do an 80% charge in the time it takes for me to have my cup of coffee. It's also got 6 different ways to recharge, which allows me to go live without interruption. So whatever happens, the show will go on. In today's show, we're going to be talking to Jeremy Scharlow, authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Now, if you've never met my guest for today, he is a former patrol officer and SWAT member who's dedicated his life to advocating for PTSD awareness and supporting military and law enforcement veterans. He's also the founder of relearningtolive.com and the author of My Brother's Keeper, Relearning to Live with PTSD. So help me welcome him to join me on the show today. Jeremy, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to have you join me, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your journey, and we'll also dive a little bit into your book. What inspired you to want to share your story and write My Brother's Keeper? And I ask this question because we all have experiences in life, but not all of us take to pen and actually write a book. What was the inspiration for you wanting to share your story?
Well, the inspiration was kind of twofold. First, I was in the process of seeing psychologists and psychiatrists, and we were discussing the different methods used in order to help one along with cognitive behavioral therapy and learning the processes behind the healing. And one of the suggestions my psychologist made was begin keeping a journal. He wanted me to keep a journal to kind of write down what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, and even write down my story in detail in order to have that exposure therapy element to it. So that's how I began. The book itself began from essentially my journal scribblings, and then was refined into its current version.
It definitely is a great way of therapy that I've heard from many out there is, journaling and physically writing things down. Did you write with a pen or did you type it? Because that's another dynamic that I often hear people talk about. Some people are okay typing away and other people actually want to hold a pen or pencil in their hand and write it longhand. What did you do?
I actually did a little bit of both. I have a stylus and whatnot in my phone, and so I actually had a bunch of different locations. I had notes in my phone that were typed out with the keyboard. I used the pen and actually scribbled out notes, and then around my apartment there would be different just scratch paper with different musings on it and whatnot. It was not uncommon for me to print out a chapter or whatnot and then spend hours just reading it over and over again, making scribblings on the paper itself, rewriting things by hand before it would make it to its final version.
Well, that's also a great way of doing it, just doing whatever feels comfortable for you. Now, how did your experiences...
The biggest part about... I'm sorry to interrupt, but the biggest part of that was I never knew where I was going to be when I had an idea or feeling that I needed to write. And so that's why there were so many different mediums. If I had a pen and paper, I wrote it on the pen and paper. If I had a bar napkin, I wrote on the bar napkin. Whatever I had available to keep that so I didn't lose it, because we all have an idea, and then when you go back to it later, it's like, what was that?
Sorry. I know, yes, and some people even use voice notes. Because I have a brain like a sieve. I always tell people. So, sometimes you have that thought and 5 minutes later that thought is gone. So it's so important to write it down. I did the same thing when I was at some point dealing with an inability to sleep at night. And I had a notebook and a pen next to my bed. And I would write things down because by the morning, all those thoughts are gone, How have your experiences as a patrol member shaped your perspective on PTSD? I mean, prior to joining the forces, did you have a framework of what PTSD was, and did that change once you lived the experiences?
Absolutely. I had the basic preconceived notions that most type A personalities have about PTSD and what it entails. It's not going to happen to me. I'm stronger than that. I wouldn't, I would be stronger than that given the situation. And I learned very quickly that wasn't the case. I wasn't able to handle the flood of emotions and the constant ruminating negativity in my mind. It was just something I wasn't prepared for, and I wasn't able to handle without the help of both professionals and the support system I was able to cultivate.
And from your perspective, what would you say was the most challenging part of your journey with PTSD, and how did you overcome it? Do you overcome it? Is it always a work in progress?
I definitely believe it's always a work in progress. I still struggle with nightmares and sleeping issues. I can't tell you the last time I slept through a night where I wasn't woken at least once or twice, if not 14 or 15 times, just because of the nightmares and the ruminating thoughts and things of that nature. If there's a crick in the house, I'm so hypervigilant that it wakes me up and I'm already in panic mode right away, ready to fight or to deal with whatever threat that caused that little creak. And most of the time it's house settling, so I don't know how I'm gonna really solve a house settling issue that's scaring me. But overall, it's the fear. I became very fearful. of everything around me. And I would say that is the biggest thing I've struggled with my journey through PTSD. And that fear would come in many different ways. It would be fear to try new things. It would be fear to try the old things. It was almost like I was stuck in one place out of fear, and there was no up, there was no down. It was all the same.
That in itself can pose many challenges. How do you, from your own personal experience, how do you think society in general could better support the military and law enforcement veterans who struggle with PTSD?
So on the military end, there's a lot of support through different veteran organizations, and then non-government entities such as the organization that I ended up getting involved with, Operation Enduring Warrior. Those types of organizations are great. They do a lot of good work. However, the law enforcement side is a little bit behind the curve, I guess is the best way to put it. We still have administrators who don't necessarily believe that PTSD is a major issue that they're having to deal with, while we continue to see the suicide rates among law enforcement officers being some of the highest in the nation. I still feel like we are behind the curve in terms of dealing with PTSD in the law enforcement community. And that is the intent of my speaking out. I want to bring attention to this so that we can make some positive changes and maybe ensure that nobody suffers alone.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's quite, it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. It has to be an ongoing awareness campaign. What role do you think the community could play in the healing process for individuals in general with PTSD, do you think?
So I think the biggest thing is just understanding that potentially the individual struggling with PTSD may not be in their right mind. I guess that's the best way to put it. There are things that I've said and done while having a, quote unquote, an episode, or when I've been at the depths of my depression, that I'm quite embarrassed of. In one of the chapters of my book, I discuss different things to do in order to that I realized helped me along my own healing path. And one of those things was forgiving myself. Forgiving myself for the things I did, for the things I said, for how I acted when I was in the worst potential place I could have been. Some of it wasn't rational, and realizing that the lack of rationality may be a symptom of somebody experiencing a PTSD issue. I think that's important.
I think one can never undervalue the value of support, of people just simply giving you grace, or
Absolutely.
giving you the space to be, and not always. I don't know why it is that people's default reaction is always to be unkind, and especially on social media. I find that very, very challenging, that's people's default reaction. It would be so much better if our first default reaction was to simply be kind. Doesn't mean you have to do anything. You don't have to spend money. Just be kind. How is your advocacy work with relearningtolive.com impacted your life and the lives of others? Tell us a bit about Learning to Live.
Yes, ma'am. So through my journey, I had a bunch of struggles involving alcohol, pills. I became addicted to, my depression medicine, as well as Xanax and alcohol, and mixing those. And through my issues, I started to realize that I needed help. And so I started speaking out. I began speaking out on Facebook, just essentially, for lack of a better word, complaining letting everybody see what it looks like to have the ups and downs, instead of trying to filter and only put out on Facebook the good stuff, which is usually what we see when we go to social media. Everybody wants to see the good stuff. Well, it's not the good stuff that is the reality. It's all the time. Sometimes it's that bad stuff, and people need to see that not only does it happen to us all, but the extreme way it can happen, and then the way we need to continue and push through regardless of the depths we are at. So by speaking out on Facebook, I was allowed, or it allowed me to create the Relearning to Live website and really get my message out to people. Through that process, an organization called Operation Enduring Warrior found me, and they really became my family. They actually showed me what it meant to support one another. They showed me what the thin blue line was. They showed me what it meant to be your brother's keeper. And I talk about them in great detail in my book.
Thanks very much for sharing that. So Lillian here in the comments is asking, how can we create more awareness?
I think by telling our stories. Storytelling is the best way to allow somebody else an actual glimpse. I mean, we all see movies and whatnot, but when you read a book, it's different than watching something on TV. Your mind pictures something so much more accurate and more relevant to you when you're reading something yourself rather than somebody portraying an image to you. So I think that if you have the ability, write. If you have the ability, speak out. If you have the ability, share on Facebook, do the social media stuff if you can. But, writing, sharing our stories, speaking, doing podcasts such as this, those are all things that help bring awareness to PTSD.
Now, if someone has recently been through a traumatic event that triggers PTSD and feels alone and not sure of, what to do, what would you say to such a person now, having been on this journey for a while yourself?
The first thing is, if you're in that position where it is truly a life or death situation, if you're feeling such that you may make an ultimate decision, creating a permanent solution to a temporary problem, call 911. It's not fun. It's not going to be enjoyable. It's going to suck for a little bit after that. But I would rather you be alive and dealing with the suck than not being here at all. And I tell that to my friends when I work with them involving these kinds of things. If you call me and you express to me that you're going to take your own life, I am going to call 911, even if it ends our friendship. I'd rather you be mad at me and alive than not be here at all. So that's the first thing. Accept that sometimes you need help, and sometimes it hurts to get the help you need, even though you don't necessarily want it to believe it'll help in the way that you want. When you're at the decision to make that ultimate decision, any help is better than no help. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing to somebody new to dealing with these types of issues is forgive yourself. Again, that is so important. Things are going to happen that you can't control. Let go of those things. You can't control these things. And sometimes those things are the thoughts in your own mind. Recognizing that you can't control them, but you still have to deal with them, can go a long way. And that leads to the next one, patience. You need to have patience with yourself. You need to recognize that Rome wasn't built in a day, neither were you. Your healing journey is going to have ups and downs. You're going to have days where you feel great. You may even have weeks or months where you feel great and you have no issues. And then all of a sudden a car backfires and you're diving under a desk because, obviously that's situational, but that's the type of thing that I would recommend people pay attention to. Make sure you build your routines to help you through those dark places and rely on those routines daily. Those routines are what gets me through the dark places. It's easy to go to the gym and do XYZ and keep to a schedule when you're feeling good. So much harder to do that when you're not feeling good, when you're in your head or whatnot. And sometimes, most of the times, relying on those automatic routines that you've built during the good times, you can just put it in autopilot, coast through the bad times, and then find yourself in a better spot on the other side.
Something that you mentioned there that I want to just pick up on is, we can be that friend who calls 911.
Mm-hmm.
And, from my own personal experience as well, it's not easy to be that friend either, because
No, not at all.
You don't know how the person is going to perceive your help.
Yep.
But you don't want. I would rather make the call than live with the consequences of not making the call.
Exactly. And that's the point. You know what? Again, I'd rather them be mad at me than not be here. We can argue about it for the rest of your life, how angry you are at me about me calling 911. I'd prefer that we have that argument for the rest of your life, because you have a life to argue with me, rather than making that ultimate decision and ending any possibility of healing.
No, it's very strange that we even have to ask this question or even talk about it. But how do you think we can continue to break down the stigma around mental health and PTSD? Because there are still, unfortunately, so many people that don't recognize that this is a real thing.
I think we need to be a little confrontational about it. I'm not saying go out there and burn down a house or anything of that nature. I'm more referring to, if somebody challenges you, speak to them about it. Explain why they are wrong. Essentially, that it is an issue. Educate yourself on the issues. That way, when somebody does spout off something that you don't agree with, you have the ability to retort in an intellectual way that leaves emotion out of it. The moment we start pulling in the emotion is when we start to lose people. We need to do it from a very logical sense. If I'm here screaming and throwing a fit while I'm trying to get you to understand what I'm saying, it's going to fall on deaf ears. I have a lot more credibility sitting here having this discussion with you now and explaining what I went through, rather than, again, halfway deep into a bottle screaming and crying about what I'm dealing with.
Absolutely. Can you give us a typical example of what your advocacy work looks like?
So it's on multiple different aspects. So I do have a social media presence. I have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. I think those are the major. I have a Twitter too, but I don't think I've even used that in a while. Well, it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. My bad. But at any rate, so I have the social media aspect. In addition to the social media aspect, I got involved with an organization called Operation Enduring Warrior. The mission of Operation Enduring Warrior is to honor, empower, and motivate injured law enforcement and military veterans who have paid the ultimate sacrifice or paid a sacrifice, and we are indebted to them. We use recreational therapy and other types of therapies in order to kind of build a community and show these people that they are not alone. This organization did that for me. When I was at some of my lowest, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we think you can help us." And I'm like, "Okay, I'd love to help you. How can I help get my message out there and help these other people who may be struggling like I am?" And the response was, "We want you to become an honoree for our organization." I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds like a little bit of a bait and switch to me. You asked me to help, and now you want me to be an honoree? And they're like, yes, we have the ability to give you a platform to come out and speak, to come out and work with our Warriors Voice program, work with other veterans or other law enforcement officers who've been injured in the same fashion as I have, or in some cases even worse. but they've allowed me to kind of fit into that community and be part of the healing process for people across the country. And so my involvement with Operation Enduring Warrior has been huge. My In the time I've been with them, and it's a 100% volunteer organization. In the time I've been with them, I learned a set of skills that even allowed me to pursue endeavors in my personal life. I now work for an organization called, in my private life, I now work for an organization called the CAN Council. It's the Child Abuse and Neglect Council. And their mission, it's another nonprofit, but their mission is to create communities where children are free from abuse and neglect. And all of the skills I have now that allowed me to get this job, I learned through the work I did with Operation Enduring Warrior as an honoree. It was that empowerment that they provided me to continue my life outside of law enforcement. Getting involved in organizations such as that, it's life-changing.
Wow. That's definitely, you do a lot. You definitely do a lot. Now, how can the audience, people watching the show, at this point in time, what can they do to help spread the word and create more awareness around PTSD to support what you are doing?
Well, firstly, obviously share this podcast out to anybody you can. The more people who can see what we're doing, the more likelihood we are going to get help. Obviously, any not-for-profit work involves the asking for donations and whatnot. If you have the ability, please help Operation Enduring Warrior. They have 226 honorees last I was aware. They have 26 MAP members, massed athletes across the country who support those 226 honorees on obstacle course races, at speaking events, at races, at mountain climbs, etc. And unfortunately, those things do cost money. So if you do have the ability, sharing, donating to organizations such as Operation Enduring Warrior would be amazing. In the event that, that's not the direction you want to go, simply sharing the stories that are shared through these types of organizations. Again, Operation Enduring Warrior has a Warrior's Voice program, which I am currently the TL for. I lead that section, or that activity, I'm sorry. The program, that's what it's called. I was searching for the word, but it wasn't coming. I currently lead that program, and the intent of that program is to do exactly what we are doing right now. It's to get the message out there. It's to speak about the issues we've struggled with, and then to potentially find that one person who may be out there thinking they're alone, and then offering our hand. Hey, here's a form, become an honoree if you're eligible. And with Operation Enduring Warrior, you need to be either military vet or law enforcement vet, I believe firefighter as well. But there's other organizations out there that do the same work that we do, but for other, I would say, groups of individuals who may not qualify for Operation Enduring Warrior. So sharing the stories, getting them out there, just promoting what we're doing. That's the best you can do. If you really wanted to get hands-on, we're always looking for what we call OCAs. They're volunteers that come out on the obstacle courses with us and help get those honorees through the courses. It's life-changing to see a man with no leg run a race. It's life-changing to see what these guys can do. Oh, I think you're muted. I'm not hearing you.
I wanted to focus on Lillian's comment here. She says, I believe we all go through difficult times. We can only meet and understand each other to the level of our personal experience. Making people who haven't gone through certain experiences is challenging and not necessary. However, if you're speaking to the right crowd, it's a game changer. I wish you well, and the world needs your voice. Lillian, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lillian. And, I agree with what you're saying there. We all do have difficult times. And that's one of the things I speak on so often. We all deal with trauma essentially the same. The method we deal with trauma is essentially the same. But all of our traumas are different. I have a buddy who was blown up in Iraq. I have a buddy who was blown up in Afghanistan. Both of them are missing legs because of that. I have another friend who lost his arm in a motorcycle accident while he was serving. I have another buddy who has who had his hand crushed in the door as he was arresting somebody and has chronic problems due to that. I was shot and I deal with PTSD. So and those are just in my circle of influence. There's other people out there. A car accident can cause this type of an issue. Sexual assault, abuse, domestic battery. All of those things are trauma. And for us to sit here and try to grade our traumas, oh, this trauma is more important than that trauma, that's the wrong attitude, man. We're all in this together. We are on the same team. We're all on the same blue ball floating through space. Let's work together instead of against each other.
I couldn't agree with you more. You don't have to experience a particular form of trauma to understand or have empathy. We can have
Correct.
empathy regardless. There shouldn't be, and as you mentioned there, one trauma isn't more important or less important than the other one. Trauma is trauma, and just be the best kind of support that you can be. I'm sure you've learned a lot on your journey, and you continue to learn a lot on your journey. But what would you say is one of the more important lessons that you personally have learned being on this journey?
The very most important would actually be that PTSD is real. I was that type A personality, that I apologize for my language here, but that Billy Badass who didn't think it was going to happen to them. And that was really eye-opening for me to now be sitting here struggling with things that I didn't even think were real. And I look back and I question, did I treat somebody negatively or without compassion because of that? And I think it goes back to something you had said earlier on. We can treat people with empathy, and care without having to know the entire story. We don't have to, we can just not be mean.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Just be kind.
Yeah.
My next question to me is kind of an interesting one, because I think sometimes it's not just people on the outside, but it's often also people in your close circle, your family and your friends. How has your relationship with your family and friends changed since your diagnosis?
I don't really have many of the same friends that I did during that time. Some of my actions, and I believe in taking extreme responsibility. While I was struggling with PTSD, that does not negate my responsibility of the actions I took. We may be able to understand why I did something I did, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. For example, I got a DUI. I turned to alcohol and drugs, as I'd mentioned. Although prescription drugs, I turned to that direction, and I ended up getting a DUI. Is there a reason why that happened? Absolutely. I can sit here and tell you reasons and the series of events that led to that. But that doesn't negate me of the responsibility of getting behind that wheel, making the decision, and doing it. And too often, I do see a lot of people who have issues such as mine. They try to use that. They try to use it as an excuse sometimes and as a crutch. And I think we need to get away from that. My injury doesn't define me. I define my injury. And if I allow the excuses to prevail, then the injury is winning. I'm not.
There's a question here for you. How far out do you plan events, work routines, diet plans, etc., to deal with your PTSD?
So my workout routines, I have an app I use on my phone. I have workout routines planned through, I would say 6-8 months from now. And the intent there is never have a day where I don't have something to distract me, specifically with the exercise. I mean, there's all sorts of studies that suggest the benefit, mental and physical aspects of heavy exercise in terms of dealing with anxiety, depression, even nightmares and sleep disorders. So I rely on the exercise, the endorphins that are dumped when I hit that level. And so I make sure that my routines are such that there's no excuse for me to sit around and say, I don't have anything planned. If I'm telling you I'm bored, that's because I went outside of my routines. Every day is planned to the hour. When I first started, it was written down to the hour. I'm getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning. At 8:10, I'm brushing my teeth. At 8:15, and so on and so forth throughout the entire day. As time has gone on and those routines have become second nature, I don't necessarily have a schedule written out as I did before, but my routines mirror the schedule I had written out in the past. That they don't change that frequently. I have I rely on those routines more than people realize. Those routines are what get you through.
I really would. I believe myself that distraction therapy is a great coping mechanism, but you've got to have those things in place. You've got to know what your distraction methods are and how you're going to implement them, and stick to that routine. Routine somehow is important. Lillian wants to know whether meditation helps in any way.
So yes, it does. Yeah, I did start out with some meditations, simple meditations, guided meditations. There's an app called Calm, I believe, and I use some of the guided meditations through that. I firmly believe, when I'm on a 8 to 10 or 15-mile ruck, that's a lot of hours where you're just stuck in your own head thinking. That's a form of meditation. So I would call it an active meditation, but I believe that during my workouts, I'm actually engaging in that active meditation. And I think it's definitely a very positive thing to continue doing. It helps me rationalize some of my emotions and realize that, although I'm feeling it, that doesn't mean my feeling is true. It may not be based on I can't even say it, objective reasonableness. And it has to be objectively reasonable because PTSD lies. It fills our head with all sorts of things that aren't true.
Now, we mentioned family and friends earlier. If someone in your family currently is dealing with PTSD, what can you as a family do to support the person?
Listen, I think, is the best option. I mean, listening. We all want to be quick to fix the problem, and it's one thing I do, and I've learned over the time. Ask: do you want a solution, or do you need an ear? And a lot of times people just need an ear. Sometimes venting and just getting the frustration verbally off of their chest allows them to look at it from a new light. And as they're speaking to you, you'll see a light come on, and they'll solve their own problem most of the time, or they'll realize that the problem is something of their own making. So 90% of the time we are our own problem. And by listening to an individual as they express what they are feeling, it becomes apparent sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I asked you before the show started if you've got a copy of your book. Can you just show it to us? I'm going to, just show it. Tell me about, so the book is called My Brother's Keeper, Relearning to Live with PTSD. Tell me about the cover and the title.
So I came up with the title through my work with Operation Enduring Warrior. It's very common in these circles, in military police circles, to refer to somebody who you may be in combat with or in a life or death situation. That's your brother. It's deeper than just a friend. It's somebody you would rely on with your life. And so as I learned how to heal, and I received help through Operation Enduring Warrior. I found that there was healing in helping others. And so my brother's keeper, Relearning to Live with PTSD, was born out of that concept. I was in the process of relearning how to live through help from my brothers and sisters. I mean, it is my sister as well, but yeah.
So it really is a collective. It's not a specific person.
There are people in my journey that I can identify as individuals who were more supportive than others. However, it is more of a collective. It's a community that Operation Enduring Warrior had created that taught me how to go about healing. And one of the main things there that they taught was that listening, sharing your problem, you're sharing your stories with others of like mind, and then just, again, there's healing in helping others. When I'm helping a gentleman through an obstacle course race who hasn't been able to walk in 10 years because of his injury, and due to his training and everything, he's able to walk the last 5 meters of that race. Man, I can't express to you what that does. Going back to the routines and the goals, or the routines and whatnot, to help. All of your routines should be goal based, because there's a positive affect when you hit those goals, when you reach those goals. There's an endorphin dump. There's a dopamine dump. It does all of the things that help break those cycles of depression. So there's more to building a routine than just having a routine for something to do. That routine should also be set up to help you reach your goals, and in the process, you're going to lift yourself up.
So if you wouldn't mind just holding the book up again, and I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the design of the cover. Did you have any input into how that cover was designed?
I did. Actually, I had full input on it. So as you can see, alcohol, there's the pills, pistol, and the badge. I wanted it to be very clear that there was a police officer struggling with alcohol and pills that led them to the path that could potentially end their lives. Again, suicide in law enforcement is such a big issue, and it's something that a lot of people don't like to talk about. So I wanted you to be able to look at the cover and right away understand that these are the things that we are going to talk about, and it's okay to talk about them.
And what is the one thing you would say you would like people to take away from reading the book? By the way, if you are watching the show right now on Amazon Live, the book is in the carousel, so go grab a copy. It's on Amazon. You can find the book anywhere where books are sold. So do go grab a copy of the book. What do you want people to take away from reading the book?
I think I want people to realize that there is hope. And even if you're not specifically struggling with these issues, most of us know somebody who are. And by understanding what they are dealing with, you may be in a better place to be that ear and to offer that help and that hope. So the goal is to reach one. If we can reach one through this process, it's all worth it. And that has an effect. If I can reach one, then that person reaches one, then that person reaches one. We've now created a catalyst for change, and that is the goal.
Excellent. Now, Lillian's got another important question here that I think is quite interesting. She says, at what point, if you healing, could you tell that you are making progress? And she says she's asking because healing isn't obvious to the people making progress. I think it's a very valid point.
Yeah, I mean, that's very difficult because it's a very cyclical thing, and I do talk about that in my book as well. Especially when you're in the thralls of all of this, certain behaviors become repetitive, and
It's
as they
not linear.
yes, it is definitely not linear. There are ups and downs. Healing is not a straight up trajectory. There are going to be downs. There are going to be ups. I think it's about perspective, and I think it's about breaking the cycles that are causing you harm. We all know what they are. I knew that drinking a fifth of whiskey every night was a problem. And one of the ways I knew I was healing is I didn't drink a fifth of whiskey every night anymore.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know what our issues are. We might not want to admit them. We might not want to, because it does take a lot of self-reflection, and it takes a lot of looking at yourself and identifying the problems you created, not what other people created that may have led to your trauma, but what can you do to create your situation, make your situation better. And when you do that and you actually start to see your life change, it's great.
One thing that I'm hearing you say is that it takes a lot of introspection and honesty. You've got to be honest with yourself, because I don't think you can move
100%.
forward unless you are able to be, don't try and deceive yourself, because you're doing yourself a huge, big injustice.
Correct.
What is the most powerful thing someone can do to support a loved one? I know you mentioned listening earlier. What else can they do to be supportive?
They can be honest as well. All of my friends have no problems calling me and saying, "Hey, Jeremy, you're screwing up." And that's the friend we need. That's the loved one we need. We don't need somebody who's just going to say, "Oh, you dealt with this trauma, therefore you have an excuse to not be to your full potential." That's not okay. Yes, we do have a trauma. Yes, we do have these issues. However, I'm not absolved of living and living good. I have a responsibility to myself, to my family, to the community to heal and do better.
Wow, I think that's powerful. Jeremy, thank you so much. It was amazing talking to you. Can I ask you one more time to hold up the book? Please go and grab a copy of my brother's Keeper. It's a great read and a great way of supporting the work that Jeremy is doing. So do go and grab a copy. I want to say to our amazing audience, we've had a great audience on the show today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, for being supportive in the comments. Really, really appreciate it. And Jeremy, thank you for being a great guest. Rachel says, great job, Jeremy. Great interview. Thank you very much for that support.
Thank you, Rachel.
Much appreciated. Lillian, thank you very much for being part of the conversation today.
Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week on another episode of Books with Bridgetti. Until then, stay well, everyone, and goodbye for now. Thank you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
This might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months, and this has to be one of the most sophisticated with the kids that I used to teach called bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.